I showed up to help my family move into their new house. When I got there, the doors were locked. I called my dad, he said. We didn't need your help. My mom texted, we got it covered. I left without saying a word. Days later, they were begging for my help. Too late. So, let me set the scene. I'm Ben, 28, and for most of my life, I've been the person my family calls when things go sideways. I'm the fixer, the responsible one. If something needs to be done, especially something physical like moving, fixing stuff, or setting up, I'm the one who shows up. I've never really minded, even though it often feels like my parents only call on me when it's convenient for them. It's just always been part of the role I play in the family. Now, my parents, Carl and Linda, had been talking about moving for a while. The house they lived in had always felt a bit too cramped for them, and Carl had been pushing this idea of buying something bigger for a few years. At first, I didn't really take them seriously. My parents weren't the type to make drastic changes, especially financially. But then, one day, my mom mentioned they'd found a house, a perfect one, and they were closing on it. I didn't even have time to process it before they were deep into the moving preparations. I didn't mind helping, of course. It was a huge task, and I knew they'd need help with packing, lifting, and organizing the move. They were both getting older, and I had the time and energy. I also figured it'd be a good opportunity for us to spend some time together. But there was something about this move that felt different, something off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I had a gut feeling that things wouldn't go as smoothly as they made it sound. Moving day rolled around, and I was ready. I'd cleared my schedule, packed up some tools, and drove to their new house early in the morning. The last time I'd seen the house was a few weeks before, when they were just getting started with the renovations. I was eager to see how much progress had been made. When I pulled up to the new house, the first thing I noticed was the chaos. The front yard was littered with boxes, and the garage door was open, revealing even more piles of stuff. It was clear they hadn't even started moving in yet. I thought I'd help them get organized, maybe start unpacking some of the heavier things. But as I walked toward the front door, I noticed something strange. The house was eerily quiet. I knocked a few times, figuring they might be upstairs or in the back, busy with something. But there was no response. I knocked again. Still nothing. I checked my watch, figured they'd be awake by now, but I didn't hear any sounds of activity inside. Feeling a little awkward, I tried the door handle. It was locked. At this point, I was a little confused. I knew they were planning on moving in, so why wasn't anyone around? I stood there for a few moments, trying to figure out if maybe they'd gone out for breakfast or if they were just in the middle of some other task I didn't know about. I pulled out my phone and called my dad. It rang a few times before he picked up. Hey, Dad. It's Ben. I'm here. The door's locked. Do you want me to wait outside or, we didn't need your help today, Ben, he said, sounding distracted and maybe a little annoyed. I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. What do you mean? I thought you needed help moving in. No, we're good, he replied quickly. Your mom and I are handling it. You don't need to worry about it. I felt a flash of confusion. This wasn't like him at all. Wait, are you sure? I drove all the way out here. I even brought some tools to help with the heavy stuff. We're fine, Ben, he cut me off, his tone getting a little sharper. Just head home. We'll be fine without you. There was a pause, and I just stood there for a second, not sure how to respond. Okay, I said, feeling like I had just been dismissed. All right, I'll leave then. And then, just like that, he hung up. I stood there in front of the house, my hand still holding the phone, staring at the door. The entire situation felt wrong. Not just the fact that I had driven all this way for no reason, but the way my dad had spoken to me, it was almost like I wasn't welcome. It stung. We weren't super close, but I thought we had a decent relationship. It had never been like this before. I decided to try one more thing. I shot my mom a quick text. Hey, Dad said you guys are good with the move, but I came over to help. Is everything okay? I waited for a few minutes, checking the time and pacing a little in front of their new house. Finally, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, half expecting an explanation or maybe even an apology. The message from my mom was short, almost to the point of being cold. We got it covered. Don't worry about us. I stood there for a long time after reading that, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Here I was, ready to help, and both my parents had told me in no uncertain terms that I wasn't needed. I had no idea why they'd suddenly decided I wasn't part of the equation, but it hurt. And it wasn't just the fact that they didn't need me, it was the way they'd brushed me off, like I didn't matter. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had to make a decision. I could stand here and wait for them to maybe come around, but it felt like they were shutting me out. So, I did the one thing that felt right in the moment. I turned around, got back into my car, and left without saying another word. As I drove back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been dismissed. But what stung the most was that I hadn't even been given the chance to offer them any real help. I had done everything right. I showed up, prepared to put in the work, and all I got in return was a cold shoulder. Days passed, and I didn't hear a word from either of them. I didn't reach out, either. I had a lot of things on my mind, but that whole interaction kept bugging me. What was the point of me being there if they didn't want my help? Then, a few days later, I got a text from my mom. "Hey, Ben, we could really use your help with unpacking. Can you come over? The place is still a mess, and we need a hand." I read the text a few times. I knew exactly what I should do. I could have gone right over, helped them, and pretended like everything was fine. But something inside me told me not to. I wasn't ready to go back just yet. Not after how they treated me. I spent the next few days in a haze, not knowing exactly what to think. I kept rereading that text from my mom, letting the words sink in. "We could really use your help with unpacking. Can you come over? The place is still a mess, and we need a hand." It felt almost like they were trying to act like nothing had happened. But how could I just forget what had transpired? How could I let them get away with treating me like I didn't matter? I won't lie. A part of me wanted to go over there, help them out, and pretend like everything was fine. After all, they were my parents. I'd always been there for them, no matter how unreasonable they got. But this time, it felt different. They had taken my time, my energy, and my trust for granted. It wasn't just that they didn't need my help. It was the way they had shut me out. Like I was an afterthought. It wasn't even the fact that they didn't want me around to help them move. I could have understood that if they'd been more upfront about it. But it was the way they made me feel small, almost like I was inconveniencing them by offering my help. The dismissal, the coldness, it left a mark. And now I wasn't sure how to approach them. That evening, I got a call from my dad. I stared at my phone for a moment before picking up, half expecting him to apologize or at least offer some kind of explanation. But what he said was the complete opposite of that. "Hey, Ben," he said, his voice flat, as if the conversation we did before hadn't happened at all. "I just wanted to check in. Your mom and I are still really stuck on some things at the new house. Can you come over tomorrow and help with the heavy stuff?" It was like a slap to the face. He didn't even acknowledge how rude he'd been before, how he'd dismissed me when I showed up to help. It was as though none of it mattered. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Dad, why didn't you want my help the other day? Why did you make it seem like you didn't need me?" He hesitated, and I could hear him shuffle the phone around in his hand. "What? Oh, come on, Ben. Don't be like this. We just got caught up with stuff. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal? That's what he thought? I had driven all the way out there, spent my morning ready to help, and all I got was a door slammed in my face and a curt dismissal. It was a huge deal to me, but I didn't say anything right away. I knew if I pushed too hard, I'd only get more of the same defensive answers. So, I stayed quiet for a moment, letting the silence stretch. "I'm not sure if I'm ready to help yet, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't just treat me like I don't matter and expect me to come running when you change your mind." His voice grew sharper. "Don't be difficult, Ben. We need your help. I'm not asking for much. Just come over and get the job done." I felt a sharp, cold anger building inside me. I wanted to yell at him, to tell him exactly what I thought about the way they had treated me, but I didn't. Instead, I let out a sigh and said, "I'll think about it." That was the last thing I said before hanging up. The more I thought about it, the more the weight of their actions settled on me. They didn't need my help. They wanted my help when it was convenient for them. They didn't care about how I felt. They only saw me as a tool, someone they could call on when the work was too much for them to handle, and when I wasn't around to do it, they'd just carry on without a second thought. A day passed. 2 days passed. And all I heard from them was a couple of texts here and there, asking for updates on when I would show up. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. I had always been the one to clean up their messes, the one who kept everything running smoothly when things fell apart. But this time, it wasn't just about moving furniture or unpacking boxes. It was about respect. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I received another message from my mom. It was as simple, "Are you coming over to help us unpack or what?" This time, though, I didn't feel that familiar sense of duty pulling me to their door. Instead, I felt a cold detachment. The words seemed to hit me differently now, as if they were an afterthought, as if they were expecting me to just show up and do their bidding without ever acknowledging the way they'd treated me. I sat with the phone in my hands for a few minutes, letting the silence weigh on me. Then, I finally typed a response. "I don't think I'll be coming over anymore." I stared at those words for a long time, reading them over and over. It felt final. I wasn't going to keep putting myself in a position where I was just used. Not anymore. I didn't hear anything for the next day or two. Part of me wondered if they even cared. But then, just when I thought the whole situation was behind me, the texts started coming in. First from my mom, then from my dad. It was a slow build-up at first. "Why aren't you responding?" My mom texted. "You're being ridiculous, Ben. Just come over and help." Then from my dad. "We really need you here, Ben. Don't make us beg." I couldn't believe it. After all that had happened, after everything they'd said to me, now they were begging. Now they wanted me. I stared at the messages for a long time. Part of me wanted to give in, to go over there and show them that I was still capable of being the person they needed, even after everything. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt, the part that had been dismissed and belittled, wasn't so willing to forgive them this time. It felt like they were trying to take advantage of me again. They thought that because I'd always been there for them in the past, they could just pick up the phone and I'd come running when they needed me. But I wasn't sure I wanted to be their safety net anymore. It was strange, really, how quickly things had shifted. For most of my life, I had been the one who did everything. I was the one who showed up when they needed help, the one who cleaned up the messes they'd left behind, the one who always forgave, always made excuses for their behavior. But somewhere along the way, I started to wonder if they saw me as more of a convenience than a son, a tool they could use when they needed something and discard when they didn't. I could hear the desperation in their messages, and it stung. The same people who'd pushed me away, who'd told me my help wasn't needed, now couldn't seem to get their hands on enough of it. It wasn't just about them moving anymore. It was about them treating me like I didn't matter until they had a use for me. And for the first time, I was beginning to realize that I had the power to stop letting them do that. But that didn't mean I was ready to make it easy for them. I didn't respond to the text right away. I sat with them for a while, thinking. It felt good to have the control for once, to not be the one jumping to fix everything. But as much as I was hurt, I knew I couldn't just leave it at that. I had to make them understand how it felt to be cast aside, to be treated like an afterthought when it suited them, and then begged for help when things got tough. They needed to learn that I wasn't always going to be their backup plan, that I deserved more than what they had given me. The next day, I got a call from my mom. It was the same tone she'd used in her texts, urgent, almost pleading. "Ben," she said, sounding exasperated, "you have to come help us. The place is a disaster. We're completely overwhelmed, and we can't do it without you. Please." I let it ring for a moment, not answering. I wanted to let her sit in the silence for a while, just like I had done. I wanted her to feel how I felt when they'd ignored me that morning, when they'd told me I wasn't needed. After a few rings, I finally picked up. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm not coming over. Not today. Not unless you're ready to have a real conversation about how you treated me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her brain working, scrambling to figure out what had just happened. She wasn't used to me refusing. She was used to me being the dependable one, the one who came running the second they called. "Ben, please," she said, her voice dropping a little. "We're really in a tough spot here. It's not just about the boxes. We need your help with everything. I can't do this without you. Just come by for an hour, and then you can leave if you want. We'll talk, okay?" I could hear her desperation, and part of me felt the tug of guilt. But I knew this wasn't about helping them move. This was about something bigger, something I hadn't really allowed myself to admit until now. It was about teaching them a lesson. It was about standing my ground for once. I'm not coming over, I repeated, more firmly this time. Not unless you can admit what you did. I want you to understand how hurt I was, how you made me feel when I showed up, and you acted like I was nothing. You don't get to treat me that way and expect me to just forget it. Not anymore. There was a long silence, and for a second, I wondered if she was going to hang up on me. But then she spoke, her voice quieter this time. I didn't mean to hurt you, Ben. We just didn't think. Things got chaotic, and exactly. I cut her off. You didn't think. You never do. You just take and take, and when I stop giving, you act like I'm the one who's being unreasonable. I let that hang in the air for a moment. I wanted her to feel it, to understand the weight of my words. She had to realize that I wasn't going to be the one to always pick up the pieces anymore. I'm sorry you feel that way, she said finally, but it didn't sound like a real apology. It sounded like she was just trying to smooth things over, hoping I would cave. But I didn't. I'll think about it, I said, before ending the call. The next few days were quieter. My parents didn't reach out as much, and I didn't initiate contact either. It felt strange, not talking to them, but it also felt freeing. I didn't feel like I was at their mercy anymore. I wasn't just the person who cleaned up after their mistakes. And as the days passed, I began to wonder if they even noticed the distance I was putting between us. Then, about a week later, I got another text from my dad. It was brief, just like the others, but this one hit a little differently. Ben, we've hit a wall. Can you come over and help? It's getting pretty bad here, and we really need you. Please. At that point, I was done with the emotional games. They were trying to guilt me, trying to manipulate me back into the role they'd always assigned to me. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not anymore. I took my time to respond. When I finally did, I made it clear how things were going to go from now on. I'll help you when you start treating me like an equal. When you stop using me only when it's convenient for you. I won't just come running anymore. I didn't expect an immediate response. It was clear they hadn't learned yet. But it was important to me that they understood this wasn't just about moving boxes anymore. It was about respect. It was about standing up for myself. A few hours passed after I sent that last message, and I didn't hear anything back immediately. Part of me expected my parents to give up, to continue with their usual pattern of pretending everything was fine until they needed me again. But that wasn't what happened. Later that evening, I received a text from my mom, and when I saw the notification, I felt a strange sense of calm. It wasn't a desperate plea like before. It wasn't an apology or a promise to change. No, it was worse. We're just going to have to manage without you. Your dad and I are tired of trying to get through to you. Maybe you don't care about us anymore, but we've got enough on our plate. It was as if they were completely oblivious to the fact that they'd made me feel like I didn't matter for so long, and now that I was standing up for myself, they couldn't handle it. It was the ultimate form of gaslighting. They were twisting the situation, making it seem like I was the one who was being difficult, when in reality, they had pushed me to this point. I stared at the screen for a while, letting the words sink in. At first, I thought about texting something sharp back, something that would make them understand the depth of my frustration. But then I realized I didn't need to respond right away. I didn't need to play into their game of manipulation anymore. I could walk away, and for once, it felt like the right decision. I didn't reply to her message. Instead, I put my phone down, walked away from the situation, and focused on something else for a while. I needed to get my head on straight. After everything, I couldn't just let them off the hook so easily. They needed to understand that the days of me being their backup were over. I had to stand firm. 2 days later, I got a call from my dad. I almost didn't pick up, but I figured it might be important. It wasn't. Ben, he started, voice strained. We've been waiting on you. We're really getting behind on unpacking. It's been a mess here. Please, just come by and help out. He sounded so weary, as if he had been doing all the work himself, and it was somehow my fault that he couldn't keep up. I felt a wave of anger rise up in me, but I tamped it down. I knew what I needed to do. I was tired of being manipulated. Dad, I said, keeping my voice calm, you've been treating me like I don't matter for weeks. I don't just show up when it's convenient for you anymore. I'm not going to be your last-minute fix when everything falls apart. I've been there for you, and every time I show up, I get shut out or ignored. I'm done. I could hear him trying to speak over me, but I wasn't having it anymore. I don't think you understand how hard it's been for me too. You want me to just drop everything, like I'm nothing but a tool. Well, I'm not doing that anymore. You need to figure it out on your own, like you've been telling me you can." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a second, I thought he might finally understand. But then, his response made it clear that nothing had changed. "Fine, Ben. If that's how you feel, we don't need you anyway." It was the same tired line they always used when they were trying to make me feel guilty for standing my ground. But it didn't work this time. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I hung up without another word. That was the last conversation I had with either of them for a while. They stopped trying to contact me for a few days, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But things didn't stay quiet for long. After about a week of no contact, I got a call from my cousin Lucy, who I hadn't spoken to in months. She wasn't someone I was particularly close to, but I knew her well enough. She worked with my parents at their business, and we were somewhat on friendly terms. "Ben," she said, her voice hesitant but urgent, "I'm sorry to bother you, but your mom and dad are freaking out. They're in way over their heads with this move, and they're not asking for help from anyone else. They've been trying to do everything themselves, and now they're stuck. They're too proud to admit they need you, but I'm telling you, they're getting desperate." I had to admit, there was a small part of me that felt a bit of satisfaction hearing that. They had pushed me away, made me feel like I wasn't wanted, and now they were stuck. It was almost poetic. But as Lucy continued, I realized she wasn't calling to tell me how badly my parents had messed up. She was calling to guilt-trip me into helping. "They're not doing well, Ben," Lucy said. "They really need you. Can you at least come by for a couple of hours to help them with the heavy lifting?" I paused before answering. I knew she wasn't directly trying to manipulate me the way my parents had, but it still felt like I was being pulled into the same old cycle. I wasn't going to give them what they wanted this time. They needed to face the consequences of their actions. "No, Lucy," I said, finally, with a firmness I hadn't felt in years. "They've made their bed. They've been treating me like I'm not worth the effort. They don't get to turn around and expect me to come running just because they need something now. They've pushed me away for far too long. This is their problem now, not mine." There was a long silence before Lucy responded. "I understand," she said quietly, and I could tell she didn't quite know how to handle it. But she didn't push me further. I hung up, feeling a sense of finality. Days passed. I stayed away from my parents and continued living my life without their constant demands. I didn't feel guilty anymore. For the first time, I realized that I didn't have to sacrifice my happiness for their convenience. And that was a revelation I didn't expect to come from a simple move. Eventually, I got a message from my mom, but this time it wasn't the usual, "We need you" text. It was more subdued, like they had finally realized they had pushed me too far. "Ben, we messed up. We're sorry for how we treated you. We never meant to make you feel worthless." I could tell that she was trying, but it felt like too little, too late. The damage had already been done. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't need to. They had made their bed. They had taken me for granted for so long, and now they were finally seeing what that cost them. They had learned a lesson the hard way, but it wasn't my job to make it easy for them. In the end, they did manage to unpack the house on their own, but I wasn't there to help. They didn't call me again after that message. I didn't know if they were truly sorry or just embarrassed by the situation, but it didn't matter. I had learned to stand up for myself, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. As for me, I moved on with my life. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I learned that family isn't about who can be the most convenient when you need them. It's about respect. And I wasn't going to let anyone take mine for granted ever again.